The Bible is filled with powerful stories that remind us of one unshakable truth. When God has chosen you for a purpose, no enemy, no obstacle, no setback can stop His plan from unfolding in your life. One of the clearest examples of this truth can be seen in the story of Joseph, a young man whose journey began in a small household but stretched all the way into the palace of Egypt. Joseph wasn't born into a perfect situation. He was the 11th son of Jacob, and from the start, his life carried both favor and tension. His father loved him more than his brothers, and that love was made clear when Jacob gave Joseph a special coat, one woven with many colors. That coat wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of Joseph's favor and uniqueness. But what made Joseph stand out even more were the dreams God gave him. In those dreams, Joseph saw visions of his brothers bowing before him, and even the stars, the moon and the sun, showing him honor. Imagine being a young teenager and receiving such visions. Joseph, full of innocence, shared those dreams openly with his family, but instead of celebrating with him, his brothers grew jealous. To them, Joseph's dreams weren't signs of destiny. They were threats to their pride and place in the family. This is where the tension begins. Joseph hadn't done anything wrong. He was simply walking in the favor God placed upon him. And yet, his very presence stirred up opposition. Have you ever noticed that sometimes you don't even have to do anything to make people dislike you? Simply being who God made you to be, carrying His favor, can make others feel uncomfortable. Joseph's story shows us that opposition often begins the moment your destiny starts to shine. The enemy senses there is something special about you, something that will one day impact lives and glorify God. And just like Joseph's brothers, there will be people who try to push you down, silence you, or strip you of what makes you unique. But here's the comforting truth. What is from God cannot be destroyed by human hands. Your destiny doesn't depend on your enemies approving of you. It depends on God's plan for your life. As Joseph's story unfolds, the tension with his brothers grows stronger. Their jealousy turns into hatred, and eventually hatred gives birth to a plan. One day, when Joseph was sent by his father to check on his brothers in the fields, they saw him coming from a distance. The very sight of him in that colorful coat stirred up their anger. They whispered among themselves, "Here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him and see what becomes of his dreams." Think about that for a moment. They weren't just upset with Joseph as a person, they were aiming to destroy the dream God had placed inside him. And that's often how opposition works in our own lives. The enemy doesn't just fight you for who you are, he fights you for what you carry. But even in that dark moment, God's hand was at work. Instead of killing Joseph, his brothers decided to throw him into a pit. Then, seeing a caravan of traders passing by, they sold him into slavery for 20 pieces of silver. They stripped him of his coat, but they couldn't strip him of his calling. Can you imagine Joseph in that moment? One day he was the favored son, wearing a robe of honor, and the next he was a slave, chained and led away to Egypt. From the outside, it must have looked like his destiny was over. But the truth is, God was only repositioning him. The pit wasn't his end. It was the doorway to his purpose. This part of Joseph's story teaches us something powerful. Your enemies may push you down, but in doing so, they might actually push you closer to where God wants you to be. What looks like betrayal can become the very tool God uses to move you into your destiny. Joseph didn't understand it all at the time. He probably felt abandoned, rejected, and confused. But here's the beauty of God's plan. He doesn't need your enemy's permission to bless you. Even when people try to harm you, God can turn it for your good. Joseph's journey into slavery wasn't a detour from his destiny. It was part of the process to get him to the palace. And the same is true for you. What looks like a setback may actually be a setup for something greater. Now in Egypt, Joseph's life takes another unexpected turn. He is sold as a slave to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. Imagine the pain. Joseph had gone from being his father's treasured son to being owned like property in a foreign land. Yet the Bible tells us something powerful. The Lord was with Joseph and he prospered. Genesis 39 verse 2. Even in slavery, God's favor never left him. Joseph worked with excellence, honesty, and diligence. Soon, Potiphar noticed that everything Joseph touched seemed to succeed. He trusted Joseph so much that he put him in charge of his entire household. What Joseph's brothers thought would destroy him was actually positioning him to grow in wisdom, responsibility, and leadership. But here's where another challenge comes in. Potiphar's wife began to notice Joseph, not for his work, but for his appearance. She tried to tempt him into sin, but Joseph refused. He honored God above all, even when it meant walking away from comfort or pleasure. Yet for his integrity, Joseph was falsely accused. Potiphar's wife lied, saying Joseph had tried to harm her, and he was thrown into prison. Now pause and think. Joseph did everything right. He worked hard. He stayed faithful. He resisted temptation. And still he ended up in prison. It might have looked like his destiny was slipping further away. But once again, God was moving pieces behind the scenes. In prison, Joseph's gift of interpreting dreams began to open doors. He explained the dreams of Pharaoh's officials accurately, and although he was forgotten for a season, God had already scheduled the perfect moment for his gift to be remembered. This part of Joseph's story reveals something we often struggle with. Sometimes the path to destiny doesn't look like success. It looks like setbacks. But those setbacks are classrooms. The pit taught Joseph humility. Potiphar's house taught him leadership. Prison refined his faith and activated his gift. Each stage was shaping him for the palace. And here's the lesson. Your enemies can throw you into pits. They can lie about you. They can try to lock you up. But they cannot lock up your purpose. When God is with you, no chain can bind what He has spoken over your life. After years of waiting, Joseph's destiny began to unfold before the world's eyes. Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, had troubling dreams that none of his wise men could interpret. That's when the cupbearer, who had once been in prison with Joseph, remembered him. Joseph was quickly brought from the dungeon to the palace. Standing before Pharaoh, Joseph listened carefully and, with God's wisdom, explained the meaning of the dreams. Egypt would experience 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of severe famine. Not only did Joseph interpret the dreams, but he also offered a plan: store grain during the years of abundance so the nation would survive the years of famine. Pharaoh was so impressed that he said, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" And just like that, Joseph was promoted from prisoner to second in command over all of Egypt. Imagine it. The boy who was once thrown into a pit by his brothers now sat in a palace, wearing Pharaoh's ring, leading a nation. But Joseph's destiny wasn't just about his rise to power, it was about his family too. When the famine struck, his brothers came to Egypt seeking food. They bowed before Joseph, just as his dreams had shown years before. At first, they didn't recognize him, but Joseph knew exactly who they were. And here's the amazing part. Instead of using his power for revenge, Joseph chose forgiveness. He told them, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to save many lives." Genesis 50:20. This moment reveals the heart of the message. Your enemies can't stop your destiny. They might try to hurt you, betray you, or strip you of what's yours. But they cannot rewrite what God has already written. Every pit, every lie, every prison cell only became a stepping stone for Joseph to walk into the future God had prepared. And it's the same for you. People may try to block your progress, but God has the final say. What looks like rejection may actually be redirection. What feels like defeat may be the very setup for victory. So hold on to this truth. No enemy, no setback, no betrayal can cancel God's plan for your life. If He has spoken it, it will come to pass. Your destiny is secure in His hands.